So what happens is that everybody voices their opinion, if it's working out, and as a consequence of voicing those diverse opinions, then you come to some sort of consensus, and you assume that the consensus is a better arrangement than anything you might have come up with on your own. Better because, well, because more people had input, right? So that's good, because they can take you away from your biases, right? So you want to have people around you who aren't the same as you in case your stupid bias doesn't work in this situation. Because there's places where your bias is going to work, but there's places where it's not going to work at all. So like if you're the entrepreneurial type and you have to make conscientious, dutiful, and orderly decisions, you're not the person to be thinking about those. You need someone that you don't even want to talk to help you with that. So you put together a family unit, say everybody's communicating, and hopefully what comes out of that communication, if it's truthful communication, and everyone is engaged in it with an eye to making things better, let's say, what emerges out of that is a pathway that's better than any of the pathways that any of the individuals would have come up with had they been on their own. And that's kind of self-evident, because why the hell would you have a family otherwise? Like if it's a worse solution than being alone, then why bother with it? So, and it isn't. I mean, the data on that are pretty clear. You know, it's for example, people who are in long-term relationships do better, generally speaking, than people who are single. Now, that's partly because the people who are single, some of the people who are single are sick in many ways, and that's making it difficult for them to find a partner. So, you know, it's a two-way issue, but it still does seem better for people to be in a relationship, which is kind of why most of us are searching for a relationship, right? And usually it's medium to long-term relationship. And then you see in that dyadic interaction the same thing. So I'll tell you a little story. This is a very cool idea. I'll go lateral here for a minute and deeper, because I want to show you how some of this has a metaphorical underpinning as well. Because I'm trying to also make the case that the truth that you express in speech is the thinking that redeems pathological structures and that stretches us farther into the unknown. It's really, really important. I would say that's actually, that idea has been encapsulated in our deepest stories. So let me give you an example, in ways we don't even understand. It's encapsulated so deeply that we don't even know we've done it. And so the stories that I'm thinking about are at the base of our culture, because our culture is predicated on the idea that you're actually a locus of invaluable communicative capacity. And that's why our society is grounded in respect for your sovereignty as an individual. It's a very, very deep, fundamental idea. I had this friend who went to Sweden to get married, and in the marriage ceremony, it was a Christian marriage ceremony, the bride and the groom had to hold a candle above both of them, right, while they were taking their vows. You think, okay, well, what the hell's going on there exactly? So it's a dramatic ritual, right? It's like a play in some sense. It's even like the things that kids do when they're pretending. It's a play. But what does the candle represent? Well, it represents the same thing that the candle represents if you put it on a Christmas tree. Now, you have a Christmas tree at the darkest time of the year, right? Because that's around December 21st. So the light needs to come back at the darkest possible time. And so the tree signifies, the tree with the lights on it, that's what it signifies. It signifies the re-emergence of illumination in the darkness. And illumination is associated with light. And so the light is the candle, and the candle is the thing that you hold above both people in a marital relationship as the value to which they both bow. Because you might say, well, who's subordinate to who in a marriage? You can have a big fight about that. Well, if it's a patriarchal marriage, then the man's in control. And if it's a matriarchal situation, then the woman's in control. But someone has to be in control, or something has to be in control. It's like, no, not necessarily. It could be a process that you're both engaged in, that you're both subordinate to. And that's what that ceremony represents. It's the idea is, no, you're both subordinate to the principle of illumination. It's like, yes, that's what you want to be subordinate to, that's for sure. So it isn't that I have to abide by what you want, and it's not that you have to abide by what I want. It's that both of us should be oriented towards the future, the positive future, and then both of us should be telling the truth, and then that will produce a kind of dialogue, and we're both going to abide by the consequence of that dialogue. So we're subordinate to this higher order principle of illumination. Now, because I said already this was a Christian ceremony, the illuminated candle was assimilated to the idea of Christ. So the notion there, and this is an extraordinary old notion, is the notion of the sacrality of marriage. And so the idea there is that the principle of illumination is what unites a man and a woman in a proper relationship. And the principle of illumination is associated symbolically with the idea of Christ. And so then the question is, well, then this is where this gets insanely complicated. It's very, very difficult to lay out. So then what is that superordinate principle as it's encapsulated in that symbolic structure? Okay, so it's not illumination as a mere verbal abstraction. Okay, so it's not just something that's abstract, it's something that you have to act out. So it's not only that we've formulated this relationship that puts us both, it subordinates us both to the truth. It isn't that we're only supposed to speak and think the truth, it's that we're supposed to act it out. And so that's the idea that the word should be made flesh. That's what that idea means, that it has to be acted out. And so the symbolic reference for Christ in the Christian system that at least in part underlies our culture is the idea that the truth needs to be embodied in action. That's right. And that's what you're supposed to be subordinate to. And that's the principle that revitalizes and unifies. So that's that. So that's that set of ideas. Okay, so now back to the idea of free speech. So the reason that free speech is an inviolable responsibility, we always think about it as a right. It's like, it's not the right way to think about it. It's actually a responsibility. You have the right to free speech because we need you to speak properly, because if you don't speak properly, then you can't set the world right, and we lose your perspective, and that's a very bad thing. And so you have the right to free speech so that you can adopt the responsibility to speak freely and truly, so that you can set things in order and we can hear what you have to say. And that's really how it's laid out. And the reason that we need free speech is because it's through free speech that we think, because we can't think on our own, and we need to think because we can't update our traditions and our structures, and we can't transform ourselves when we're necessary unless we can think. And so that means that unless we have free speech, then the process by which we stop our structures from degenerating, and we don't want them to degenerate. It's a bad thing, right? Because they can rigidify and become tyrannical, and God, that's horrible. Or they can dissolve and disappear, in which case, what have you got? You got nothing. You've got nihilism, you've got hopelessness, you've got aimlessness, you've got the suffering of life but no purpose. Well, that's no good. No one can live. We can't live with those two extremes. We can't live in the tyrannical extreme when everything is structured and nothing gets too updated. It gets too old and dead and kills everything. And we can't live with the dissolution of structure either, because then we have nothing. And so we have to keep the structure alive. And the way we keep the structure alive is by talking about it. But we have to talk about it properly. We have to talk about it like civilized, intelligent, committed citizens who take the responsibility that goes along with individual sovereignty as if it's the most important thing there is. Because it is. And so maybe that's why it's so good that we're engaging in this sort of dialogue, and the forum for that has started to expand. Because, right now there's any amount of political pathology tormenting our culture, I would say, both on the left and on the right, and it's destabilizing us. And, the left pathology tilts towards chaos and nihilism, and the right pathology tilts towards tyrannical order. And we've had experiences of those recently enough, we might think, let's say throughout the 20th century, so that we might have learned our lesson and figured out that if we could negotiate between those two extremes, wouldn't that be much better for everyone? And then, of course, the question there is, do you want things to be much better for everyone? And you might think, well, obviously the answer to that is yes. It's like, it's not so obvious, right? It's not, perfectly well if you sit on the edge of your bed and you have a little meditative discourse with yourself, discussion with yourself, that your motivations are far from pure. And the probability is that some of the time that you're aiming down and not up for whatever purposes you might have, revenge or anger or hostility or trauma or resentment or whatever it is, whatever chip you're carrying on your shoulder, whatever way you feel victimized by your unfortunate circumstances. And they are unfortunate, right? Let's make no mistake about that. You know, when people consider themselves victimized, it's often because, well, life is extraordinarily difficult and tragedy strikes everyone, and we're often betrayed and we're subject to malevolence, and it's no bloody wonder that we wander around with chips on our shoulder, but it isn't helpful at all. And so that's why the rule in 12 Rules for Life is, well, twofold. It's to stand up straight with your shoulders back, because that is an injunction to adopting a certain, what would you say, physical stance towards the world that, at least in principle, can undergird this psychological stance that I described. It's like, well, you have to be willing to take the whole force of the world onto yourself in some sense, and it's a catastrophe. But if you don't take it on, then you can't solve the damn problem. And you don't do that by crouching and hiding, and you don't do that by adopting an aggressive stance. Like, there are times when those things are useful, but fundamentally that's not it. Fundamentally, you open yourself up to the world, right? And that's what this stance is to put your shoulders back. And because it's to expose yourself, in some sense, to the full force of the world. You know, and the chapter's been criticized because I made a case for hierarchies, I said, which is a classic conservative case. And although I wasn't trying to say that hierarchies are immutable or appropriate in their current form or anything like that, it's a complete misreading of, an absolute misreading of what I was trying to put forward. I was trying to put forward the proposition that you have to have structure. You can't interact with the world without structure. It's not possible. This is actually the argument. The argument that I ended up having with Sam Harris was really about something like this. It's like, we have to have structure. What does the structure look like? Well, we're still debating that. But there are ways to solve that. I address some of them in 12 Rules for Life. You have to have structure, but structure tilts towards tyranny. So that's the right-wing conundrum. You need structure, but it tilts towards tyranny. And the left-wing conundrum is, well, if you have structure, then it produces all sorts of negative consequences. So hierarchical structures, for example, emerge when you're trying to pursue something that's valuable, which you need to do. You pursue something that's valuable, and it turns out that some people are better at that than others, whatever the valuable thing is. So you get inequality. As soon as you pursue something of value in a social circumstance, you get inequality, because some people are better at it than others. You know that. Plumbers. Some plumbers are better at being plumbers than other plumbers. And all plumbers are better at being plumbers than people who aren't plumbers. So you've got that inequality. Right, you've got that inequality built right in. It's a major inequality. If you have a skill, then you produce inequality in the world. It's like, well, what are you going to do? Get rid of all the skills? That's not going to be helpful. So this necessary consequence of developing specialized skill is the generation of inequality. And so if you're going to benefit from the fact that people have skills, you're going to have to accept the damn inequality. Okay, so that's what the right-wingers are always on about. It's like, you have to accept the damn inequality if you're going to benefit from the skill. And fair enough. But the left-wingers say, yeah, but there's something important that you're forgetting here, which is that if you produce a hierarchy, even if it's skill-based, then most people aren't going to benefit from that hierarchy. The benefits are going to go to a small percentage of people at the top, or they're going to go disproportionately to a small number of people at the top, and that's also the case. So another part of the political dialogue that has to be continually active is, okay, how much inequality can we tolerate to benefit from the differential in skill? And the answer to that is the same answer as the answer to the problem of structure versus transformation. It's like, there is no answer. You have to debate it all the time. It's like, so the people who are on the side of the structure have to say, well, here's all the benefits to the structure. It's worth paying a cost for, and the cost is the dispossession of the people who stack up at the bottom. And the left says, don't go too far with that, because if your structure gets too steep and too rigid, then the whole thing will collapse. It's like, yes. So how do we mediate between those two catastrophes? And the answer is, we we talk to each other and we think. And so the political landscape looks like it's set up to do two things. One is to help us determine what parts of the structure we can maintain and move forward with and what parts we have to transform. That's an active dialogue. And then the other part is to determine if we've got the hierarchies adjusted such that we're maximally benefiting from the skill, but minimally dispossessing people. And part of the problem is because you bring your biases to the damn argument, and you can't help it, is that if you're a conservative type, you're going to think, well, if the conservatives would just win the argument once and for all, then we wouldn't have a problem. And the liberals think if those damn conservatives would just go away, and the liberals could arrange the world, you know, we'd have the utopia tomorrow. And the problem with that is we wouldn't. And the reason for that is, well, as soon as you generate up your utopia, whatever it is, it turns into a structure. And then it has the same problems as all the other structures have ever had.